Good morning and welcome to today's meeting of the Suffolk County Council Development and Regulation Committee. I'm Councillor Jenny Ceresa, Chairman of the committee, and I'll be chairing today's proceedings. This meeting is being broadcast live and will also be available to watch subsequently on the Council's website. Members of the public and press may record or broadcast the meeting when not lawfully excluded, provided they show due respect to others in attendance in accordance with Council guidelines. Please ensure that electronic devices are turned off or set to silent and speak clearly into the microphones, avoiding any obstructions to maintain sound quality. We are not expecting a fire drill today. In the event of an alarm, please follow the fire exit signs at the rear of the chamber. Evacuation instructions can also be found on page 3 of the agenda. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank all committee members, officers and Democratic Services team that have supported me in my role of chairman for the last 5 years. I'd like to thank all members for their contributions, past and present, to this committee, to all the officers, legal team for their support and guidance, and of course Rebecca, who has been my right-hand lady, who has helped with all of the running of this committee, so thank you everybody. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence and substitutions. Rebecca, do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillor Andy Drummond, who is substituted by Councillor Joe Mason.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest and dispensation. Members, do you have anything to declare on this item? No? Agenda item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting. To approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of February 2026. Is everybody happy with the minutes? Yeah, that's general information, thank you. That moves us on to agenda item 4, which is the Cavenham Quarry, Cavenham Road, Cavenham, Bury St Edmunds, Suffolk, IP 286SE. This is part retrospective planning application, seeks permission for the erection and use of concrete batching plant and associated infrastructure, including highway access, together with the retrospective installation of a weighbridge office and lighting column. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the following officers who are present to assist in any points of clarification. Andy Rutter, Development Manager, and Jonathan Lockington, the Council's lawyer. I will now hand over to Andy to introduce the report, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is agenda item 4, SEC 006925F at Cavenham Quarry, Cavenham Road, Bury St Edmunds. And as already read out, this is the part retrospective application for the erection and use of a concrete batching plant, associated infrastructure, including access onto the highway, and then the fully retrospective installation of a weighbridge office and lighting column. So I'll just run through slides like we usually do. So you can see the wider site there outlined in blue, and the red line takes you from the middle of the site where the proposed application is, down south on the internal access track onto the public highway. And to the left you can see a collection of black dots, that's Tudden Village, and the black dots indicate objectors to the application, and then to the southeast is Cavenham Village, and again you can see a cluster of objections. And the last thing to mention on this slide is the dash line, the purple dash line is just the public rights of way network. Again, similar plan, just to give you oversight of the surrounding area, mainly agriculture. You can see the distinct quarry workings to the right of the plan, and again the site boundary in red and access to the public highway. And so I'll run through a few plans of the development and some site photos now. So if you're to go up the access road, due north, you come to the plant site area. So we'll start at the bottom left, and there is, so you'll see the red line, and you've got the weighbridge office, the weighbridge office and the lighting column, all of which are retrospective. I'll show you some pictures of those later on. And if you follow the red line through the middle of the site, you'll come up to the top of the plan, just towards the right-hand side, and that's the concrete batching plant there. You can see some of the other infrastructure on site, not subject to this application, already got permission. So you've got a minerals washing plant, you've got aggregate recycling, both on the middle of the plan and the right-hand side, and then on the left-hand side is an asphalt plant. So this is just some sections of the proposed concrete batching plant. So at the highest point is the mixing tower, and that's at 13.7 metres. The cement silos are at 11.6 metres, and aggregate hoppers at 6.4 metres. So if we just go clockwise, so from the left at the top, you've got the aggregate hopper on the left. That's where the different mixes of sand and gravel will sit. They then get transported via conveyor up to the plant, which is on the right-hand side, and the plan on the right-hand side, you can just see the mixer lorry that then goes underneath. And so sand, gravel, water, cement mixed together, batched together, some other additives, and into the mixer is the very high level process. So this is the area right at the top of the site where the concrete batching plant is to be sited. You'll see that they've already laid some hardcore, and the infrastructure on the left is the hopper units. This is the back of the hoppers, and then you can just see the extent to which the application is part retrospective for the batching plant. They've laid the hard standing, they've laid the drainage, and then yes, they've got some of the kit on site already. So if you were to turn around and head out of the site, in the background of that photo is then the access road that travels due south, so we're looking south here. You can see the weighbridge in the front of the picture just by the two yellowy rectangles. So that's the ramp up to the weighbridge. You've got the weighbridge office on the right-hand side, just elevated slightly, and just above the weighbridge office you can just about see a white line, and that's the lighting column. So this is the fully retrospective part of the application. So why is the application appearing here today? Well, we've had 39 third-party representations, and broadly they cover the following material planning considerations, mostly covering air quality, ecology, economics, flora and fauna, cumulative impacts, HGV movements, noise and vibration, landscape character, and the water environment. And then specifically, Cavan and Parish have objected on the following material planning considerations, being air quality, noise and vibration, traffic and highways, road safety, light pollution, and landscape character. So that's the parish to the southeast of the site, and then northwest of the site is Tadnam St Mary Parish, and they object on the following material considerations, being air quality including dust, noise and vibration, traffic, highways and road safety, light pollution, landscape character, and cumulative impacts. So to summarise, it's a planning application, and it's for the part retrospective erection and use of the concrete batching plant, associated infrastructure, including access onto the highway, and then the fully retrospective application for the installation of the weighbridge office and lighting column. And it's my opinion that the application is considered to be in accordance with National Planning Policy Framework, National Planning Policy for Waste, the Suffolk Minerals and Waste Local Plan, and the West Suffolk Local Plan. So it's my recommendation that the committee approves the planning permission subject to the conditions as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. Members, do you have any points of clarification or confirmation of facts for Andy? No, that moves us on to our public participation session, and we have received 3 requests to speak on this item this morning. I would like to invite an objector to the application, Mr. Thomas Moore, to come forward to the public speaking table. Turn your microphone on and you have 5 minutes to address the committee when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you to the assembled councillors. I am under no illusion that the likely outcome of the meeting today is that planning permission will be granted with the current conditions that have been attached to the report you have in front of you. Prior to this unjust eventuality, it is my duty as a concerned citizen to bring before you further clarification to some of the documents that have been submitted to you as facts, when in reality they are not. First of all, I will deal with the Hurlstone Partnership's assessment of the traffic that affects the village of Cavanham and Tuddenham, and secondly, I will provide testimony from myself and other local residents in response to the impact that the business of SRC Group has had on the local community and the roads that are maintained using money given to the authorities by UK taxpayers in trust that they will do the right thing. The basis of the impact on local traffic and roads is based on information collected by the Hurlstone Partnership. This report offers a snapshot of a particular time and a very specific set of circumstances that do not provide a true and accurate picture of the reality that residents live through. Kevin Blackman, who also acts as the responsible planning officer of the Cavanham Parish meeting, has spent the last 2 weeks collecting data using an ANPR camera that collects the number plates of traffic flowing in both directions of the street in Cavanham. Operating Monday to Friday over the last 2 weeks, it found that 274 unique vehicles in the N3 class made 1,140 journeys through the village, averaging 114 movements a day, with the peak of N3 movements being 184 unique movements on Thursday the 5th of March. As you will see in the reports that I have brought with me today, if you care to take a look at them, it is a rarity that these vehicle movements are less than 100 a day. These figures do not include vehicles classed as N2s and below. This information was collected and processed in keeping with UK GDPR and the Data Protection Act. The overall picture being that when combined with the general traffic of the road, the residents of Cavanham are already experiencing unsafe level of traffic for the quality of roads, adding the stress and pressure. Approval of this application would directly contribute to the highways network. When the reality that we are experiencing is so different from the figures that have been presented to you, it does stand to question whether you have been given a true and accurate picture of the situation before making a decision that will affect the lives of residents for many generations to come. Further to this, I have been collecting testimony from people that have been directly affected by the actions of SRC vehicles on our roads. A resident of Mildenhall who travels through Cavanham on her journey to Bury St Edmunds daily, on Monday the 9th of February, her window screen was cracked by debris falling from an SRC lorry. Although she contacted SRC directly about this matter, has received no response. She asked that I read the following. It was very daunting to me as a youngish female driver. It was an almighty bang, felt like it was going to come through the screen. It has chipped in 2 places and, as you will see in the picture, has cracked the screen. It sounds strange, but it honestly gave me nightmares. I had to drive a different car the following day, and I have dreams that following SRC vehicles will completely break my screen. Another resident, Ryan Swarbrick, had this to say. The road heading up to the A14 near Suffolk Transmissions is terrible. The SRC lorries have churned it up so bad that the potholes are enough to write your vehicle off. I hit a massive pothole the other day and instantly gave me a flat tyre. I had to drive to the next village to get a brand new tyre there and then. Moni Deal, a resident of Cavanham, said, I walked to the park with my kids yesterday and was so shocked by the number of lorries coming through. It is getting to the stage where I don't want to walk the kids to the park, which is crazy really. Such a shame. I love this village, but the number of lorries coming through now is awful. Lucy Bohm, a resident of Cavanham, also experienced the following. I had my windscreen damaged by one of the passing lorries the other day. I thought it was just bad luck, but reading the information you have posted regarding the lorry's behaviour and that others have had damaged screens makes it feel like it was bound to happen. Chanel Hartley-Webb, another resident of Cavenham, said, "While walking to the park with my 3-year-old twins and 5-year-old girl and a baby niece in a pushchair, the speed that particular SRC lorries were going through was unbelievable, not just through the main part of the village, but also on the Esh Bend. Selfishly, I'm not particularly bothered by the traffic coming through the village, although not overjoyed by it in our lovely quiet village. However, the speeds they are going through, putting my children and everyone else who may walk to the park at danger, is absolutely not acceptable. The danger that the actions of SRC Group and Cavenham Quarry pose..."
Thank you, Mr Moore, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you there. Your time
Thank you
is
very
up.
much.
Members, do you have any points of clarification? Councillor Beer?
Thank you. That was very interesting what you were reading out. Have you taken this up with the applicant, particularly the damaged windows and the damage to cars and what have you? Have the people spoke to them, or has there been responses?
As far as I am aware and am able to say at this moment, every person has reported this to SRC and has so far received no response.
Members, do you have any further points of clarification? No, thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr Moore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I would now like to invite the representative from Cavenham Parish Meeting, Mr Ralph Brownlee, to come forward to the public speaking table, turn your microphone on, and you have 5 minutes to address the committee when you're ready.
Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak into this meeting of the Suffolk Council Planning and Development Committee. I also would like to focus primarily on the issues of traffic, which were elaborated by the objector prior to me, Mr Thomas Moore. We have had access to the same local report. It's been clear to us from the outset that the number of HGV movements through not only our village of Cavenham but also that of Tuddenham have been significantly greater than those numbers recorded within the documentation that attached to the application. Looking particularly at paragraph 139 of the application, referring to vehicle measurements back in 2018, average measurements then were only 76 per day. And we were advised at the time that should vehicle movements in total exceed 100, then a further more detailed survey and assessment should be taken of the situation. We are now seeing, and just further to that point, the number of vehicles through Cavenham was estimated to be 1/3 of that total, i.e. anything more than 33 vehicles a day would be cause for further reassessment. Looking further at paragraph 142 of the application, appears to eliminate Bridgeman, who operate the asphalt plant on the same site, as being other than the consented activities. Important issue for us, yes, the quarry, the SRC lorries are important as the owners of the quarry, but there are many other operators who come in and out of that quarry for whom we do not have the detailed information. The report that we've managed to put together from local residents using the ANPR data gives us a more true record. And we are now seeing in excess of 200 vehicles a day sometimes. That's more than 6 times the level that we were led to anticipate when we were originally consulted on the use of the quarry originally. We accept and understand that the quarry is an important asset to the county. In no way are we going to stand in the way of approval of its use. However, we do believe there needs to be a better assessment of the damage that's being done. The fact that we have risked the life and limb of the people within the village, referred to by Thomas, I won't elaborate given that they're limited on time, but also, and truly there is risk to life. We have very narrow pathways and footpaths in the village on which young children are expected to go. There's not enough width on those paths for 2 people to pass in opposite directions. Members of the public, including children, frequently have to step out onto the carriageway on narrow bends with no visibility, and a fatality is almost inevitable at some point in the near future. Our issue here is please divert the traffic. And we're looking for some practical measures here. First of all, put a speed limit in. 30 mile an hour for a large vehicle is just ridiculous. Please, in the short term, can we have 20 mile an hour speed limits in the village? And also on the interconnecting roads, a 50 mile an hour would be far more appropriate, preferably less for those roads. The damage to the carriageways is absolutely astonishing if anyone ever takes the opportunity to take a look and see the damage that's there. So short term, we can also look for a link road. There is an existing partially formed road used by Anglian Water, which if extended, would take traffic away from the village, across farmland and onto the Higham Road, which provides direct and immediate access to the A14. That could be used to relieve the traffic through Cavenham rather, very quickly. In the longer term, we are rather dismayed at the prevarication of Suffolk Council regarding the link road between A11 and the A14. There is a clear route from the aforementioned junction on Higham Road, which could cut across to Red Lodge, where the existing intersection with the A11 exists. That would take traffic away from Tuddenham as well. So please, can we have some effort put on to getting that link road sorted, which would also then take away the traffic through our rural villages of Cavenham and Tuddenham. The traffic volumes of the quarry are a function of infrastructure across the county, projects far and wide, which are well away from our own postcode.
Thank you, Mr. Brownlee, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you there as your time is up.
Okay.
Members, do you have any points of clarification? Councillor Beer?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So you said that 200 vehicles per day. Have you got a breakdown of that 200 vehicles per day?
We have a list of registration numbers. If you would, we could supply those to you. Those are N2 and N3 weighted vehicles. We can get that information within the GDPR limitations, but we can send you the registration numbers if you so wish.
Can I come back? Could I, Madam Chairman, ask that our planning officers at the appropriate time, perhaps they could comment on these figures, because I think it's important, and also whether there's any speed limits or mitigating action that we can take. Because I think, so far they've outlined quite a lot of problems. They've also given some solutions, and I think it's worth that we should perhaps look at them. Thank you.
Councillor Cloke?
Here we are, that's better. Could I ask you, Chairman, have you approached your county councillor to have a traffic survey done, please?
We have had traffic surveys done. They've been, in the past, I'm just trying to remember, we've had speed detectors come in, and their assessment has been, because we don't have a significant number of vehicles exceeding 35 mile an hour through the village, it's not financially viable to put the speed restrictions or speed monitoring into the village. We are, however, now doing our own investment into a speed indicator device, which we hope will help.
Can I come? Yeah. That wasn't quite what I meant. I wondered if you'd had the weight.
Oh, okay. Yes, well, we've been led to believe, and again, I can refer to a paragraph in the paragraph 150 of the application, where there is a requirement on the quarry operators to put monitoring into the quarry. So we were led to believe that monitoring was going to be a statutory duty upon the quarry owners to record the number and weights of vehicles coming out of the quarry and which direction they're going into. So we believe that has been put in place, but to this date, we've not seen any implementation of that. Sorry, that's not a direct answer, but it's our reason for understanding that the information was coming.
I will bring the officers back at the end after we've had all the speakers to for any points of clarification or questions. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Frankly, I'm alarmed if your figures and facts are correct, that the report seems to be so far away from it. I mean, the question is, if you knew all this, have you actually approached Suffolk County Council about things like traffic flows, about damage to the infrastructure, etc.? Have you done that before coming here today, please?
We have on many occasions, and generally not been... and unfortunately, our councillor, Colin Noble, who we've approached generally, I don't think he's here today, unfortunately, but we have approached him on a number of occasions in the past, and basically been told we had little opportunity or little chance of being heard. So we've welcomed the opportunity today to come and say this.
Member of Parliament?
That changed at the last election. We haven't gone to the Member of Parliament recently. I thought that Suffolk County Council should be able to act, but that will be our next port of call, obviously.
Members. Councillor Stanbury.
Thank you very much. Yes, I just wanted to pick up on that about trying to involve Suffolk County Council in this prior to this meeting today, because I did check with the County Council this morning if he'd received any objections, and he said he hadn't. So I was just wondering why you haven't used the good offices of the local county councillor to try to put forward your case, because, as I said, he had received no comments whatsoever.
Okay, obviously we have been slightly lapsed. Cavenham meeting is a very small village, and in fact, you know, we don't really have the opportunity very much. The normal chairman himself was not even able to attend today. I'm attending on his behalf. It's certainly we would take more aggressive action in the future in terms of pursuing those lines of suggestion that you mentioned.
Members, do you have any further points of clarification? Thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr. Brownie.
Thank you.
I would now like to invite the representative for the applicant, Mr. George Masonham, to come forward to the public speaking table. Turn your microphone on and you have 5 minutes to address the committee when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. My name is George Messingham. I'm a senior consultant at PDE Consulting Limited, who are the agents for the application before you. We're aware of the interest in this application from members of the local community, and I wanted to take the time this morning to clarify some of the matters which have been raised, particularly in respect of HGV movements. Forecast sales of concrete-based products from the site will be around 50,000 cubic metres per annum, which will give rise to a need for around 95,000 tonnes per annum of sand and aggregates for use within the plant. The aggregates will be sourced from a combination of primary sand and gravel extraction from the quarry and recycled aggregates sourced from the existing recycling operations. The use of recycled aggregates is a more sustainable option when compared to the use of virgin materials, and helps to ensure that carbon emissions associated with concrete manufacture can be reduced. In addition to the sand and gravel sourced from the site, there is a need to import cement and a range of additives to the site for use within concrete manufacture. It's well recognised within planning policy that the co-location of concrete patching plants within mineral sites will be supported, providing that these operations are tied to the life of the wider quarry. By co-locating operations with existing mineral sites, it's possible to significantly reduce HGV movements as it's not necessary to export materials from the site to a concrete batching plant located elsewhere. As a result, it is anticipated that the proposed development would only give rise to a modest increase in HGV movements, which would sit within the day-to-day variation experienced on the highway network. This represents a significant reduction in HGV movements when considered against the alternative of a concrete batching plant located off-site. A transport statement was prepared and submitted alongside the planning application, which has had regard to these additional HGV movements in the context of existing HGV movements at the site. The document has been reviewed by Suffolk Highways, who've agreed with the findings of the report and which concludes that there will be no adverse impacts on the highway network. The whole batching process will be closely regulated by the environmental permitting regime. The enclosed nature of the plant with computerized safety systems ensures that the risk of dust released is appropriately mitigated. Additional supporting assessments have been submitted alongside the planning application, considering noise, dust, landscape and visual matters, cultural heritage and flood risk. These assessments have regard to existing established operations at the quarry and no adverse impacts have been identified. The proposal, when taken as a whole, is consistent with relevant planning policies and appropriate mitigation measures are proposed to ensure that any environmental impacts are appropriately controlled. It is concluded that the proposal represents sustainable development and will form an essential supporting role in promoting sustainable growth within Suffolk, supporting in particular wider local and government policies for the construction of new affordable housing and essential infrastructure that the county needs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Members, do you have any points of clarification? Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A bit disappointed that you didn't make any comment regarding the complaints that residents have with their vehicles. Have you taken on board to try and solve these problems, or are you aware of them? And if you are, what are you going to do about them?
Certainly it's something that the applicant is aware of. They have monitoring infrastructure in their HGVs. They're able to remotely monitor precisely where vehicles are going, the speeds that they're travelling at. They have been in discussions with the parish councils regarding their concerns on HGV movements. And it's certainly something that they will continue to be looking at and working to find, working with the local community going forward.
I do think that needs a bit more. They need to be reassured that if the damage is caused by your vehicles, that they should be reimbursed. But anyway.
Councillor Stanbury.
Thank you. It was just picking up on that point because obviously the concerns of local residents are very pertinent to us. But really a wider question really is what is the corporate social responsibility policy of the applicant? I mean, what is their approach? How could you describe their approach to concerns raised by local residents?
I mean, it's obviously not part of the applicant company, so I can't comment on their individual policies, but certainly something that they will look at off the back of this meeting. I'm sure any clarification can be provided at a later date.
Councillor Stringer.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was really interested to hear you suggesting that a concrete batching plant wouldn't have any extra HGV traffic than if it was just taking out the sand and gravel, as it otherwise would. Simply for the fact because you're importing cement to make the concrete. The cement doesn't drop out of the sky, it comes in an HGV. Any additives into the concrete will probably come in an HGV. So that's another couple of vehicle movements to make a mixer load of concrete on site. The mixer lorries themselves don't carry as much in weight as a normal bulker container. So I'm struggling to see the mathematics that if you import a quarter in weight onto the site, that doesn't create extra traffic movements that would otherwise be caused by larger lorries taking out larger loads just of the sand and gravel. Could you please explain how that's possible?
I think there's a slight misunderstanding there. So there is obviously, as I said, a modest increase in HGV movements. That is obviously discussed in the committee report. So effectively, whilst there's a modest increase, obviously some of the sand and gravel that would normally be exported to, say, an off-site concrete batching plant would be used to make the concrete on site. That's where your lessening of HGV movements comes from.
No, I'm sorry. If the concrete's made on site, it doesn't stay there, does it? You're suggesting that there's something in the minus column because the concrete's being made on site. That's the bit I'm really struggling to understand your logic, because that concrete doesn't stay there and go off and become hard. It gets exported off site in a vehicle. So there's no net decrease at all. There's got to be a significant increase. Surely there has to be an increase. If the concrete batch is normally 4 to 1, 5 to 1, that one must be an increase in HG movements in and out of that site. So there must be that 20% increase in vehicle movements at least, and is that the figure that you're claiming to be modest?
I'm just going to bring Andy in on this one quickly.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Stringer. I can just clarify the movements for everyone's benefits. So, as the agent stated, approximately 50,000 metres cubed per annum of concrete will be produced using 95,000 tonnes per annum of aggregates. The aggregate sourced will be from consented sand and gravel extraction and recycling on site. There'll be the removal of 16 movements of recycled aggregates which would otherwise be exported. There'll be the removal of 22 movements of sand and gravel which would otherwise be exported. The concrete import is 58 movements. The cement import is 58 movements. So there's a net increase of 20 movements per day, which could be represented as 1 to 2 movements per hour of the working day.
Can I thank you for that clarification? So that's there's no decrease, there's an increase. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Sowa.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the concrete this business produces, can you tell me what it is used for, please?
So the concrete produced from the...
Sorry, I just have to interrupt. There are different sort of qualities of concrete, so I just wanted to know what is this one for. No laughing, please. It's a serious question.
It's a valid question. So the concrete very much is sold to the local construction industry. As you say, you can make different grades of concrete. The computerized control in the plant basically can tailor the mix of the concrete at any point in time to match the needs of what a particular customer is after. But as I said, it's really to the local construction industry, and it's as per their requirements of what they need at the time.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. The Parish Council made reference to a link road. I just wondered what your response to that was. Thank you. To the creation of a link road, rather.
I mean, obviously we can't comment on anything that the County Highways Authority does, but obviously if the local Highways Authority did want to make improvements to the network, then it would obviously be welcomed by the applicant.
Members, do you have any further points of clarification? Councillor Kemp?
Yeah, I just wondered, a lot of these operations have a liaison group with the local parish council. Do you have one at this particular site, please?
As I said, the applicant is regularly in contact with the parish councils, which gives an opportunity for any questions that might be raised by members of the councils to be raised with the applicant, and they gives them an opportunity to respond and discuss anything that needs to be done.
So that is a formal liaison group, is it, or just informal consultation?
I believe it's just an informal consultation at the moment, but the applicant would welcome any formal liaison if required.
Is this the only batching plant within the control of the applicant?
No, the applicant, their business is based across throughout Essex, Suffolk and into Hertfordshire, as well as London. They do have a number of sites situated across that. This would obviously be another plant further into Suffolk, in addition to their existing infrastructure.
Members, do you have any further points of clarification? No? Thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr Mason. I will now bring Andy, the case officer, back to answer anything that's come up previously.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've just made some notes, hopefully can cover some points. So lots of reference to speeding and windscreen damage, which is obviously quite a sensitive matter. Unfortunately, that's not a matter for us to consider. That is a matter for the police in terms of enforcing speeding limits and if there's been damage by any road users. Next on the list was diving into the transport assessment, and actually, as you can expect, it's a very detailed document with lots of figures. And it is within the scope that the Department for Transport set out in terms of when the traffic counts were done and if they're still relevant. DFT guidance say they are still relevant. And the transport assessment does take into account the movements from the asphalt plant on site. And I think it's obviously important to remember it's not just the quarry vehicles which are on the highway. It's a mix of other businesses, it's a mix of normal cars, it's a mix of agricultural uses. But the road is on the Suffolk lorry route network. It's designated as a local access lorry route, which is the second one from the top. So the top being a trunk road, such as the A14. So that's designated as a local access lorry route, and it's defined as a road or part of a road serving an access to a specific location. And in this case, the quarry's been there since the 1950s. That is the specific location that the local access lorry route has been designated for. There's mention of a link road, potential to bypass the villages. The road or the track which is referenced is opposite the entrance to the quarry. It accesses an Anglia water sewage treatment works at the moment. It's not public highway. It doesn't form part of this application. And our highways team have reviewed the application. They're content in terms of highway safety, safe and suitable access, all of those things which the National Plan Policy Framework sets out needs to be considered. They're content with. As set out, there's a net increase of 20 movements per day. And the final point was the liaison group. There used to be a formal liaison group, and it's my understanding that it doesn't meet anymore because at the point in time it was stopped. There was none or little business to discuss. Obviously there's an option there for the committee if they want to consider alternative or additional conditions. They can be considered.
Thank you, Andy. Members, points of clarification. Councillor Beer, followed by Councillor Stringer.
Yes, 2 points I'd just like to pick up, because you gave a full report there, which was very good. But could we ask for speed limits to be looked at in that area? I know this is most likely on the main road, but 50 miles an hour or more along there could be rather high. And the other point is, could we also ask for a group liaison committee meeting be formed? Is that possible within our grasp? Thank you.
Yes, so you could condition that a liaison group is formed. It's a standard thing. If that's something do you think is appropriate, and the residents would welcome it, by the sounds of it, the operator seems up for it. The agent has indicated that they'd be open to discussions. So that is an option open to you. On the speed limits, the only thing we could do is include an advisory note that speeding and speed limit changes are considered. However, they do have to be supported by the police. They do have to be supported by data. We couldn't condition that it has to be implemented before the development takes place, but we could include an advisory note on that.
Councillor Stringer.
Yeah, thank you. My question was about speed limits as well. We understand that you can't grant planning permission subject to a road traffic order being implemented to change a speed limit. However, there is a management plan within here for the traffic entering and exiting. So could not a condition be put on that management plan that all traffic exiting and entering that should be at a different speed to the national speed limit? And I'll tell you for why. Because if people are experiencing stuff coming off wheels and breaking windscreens, that is directly speed related. The slower the speed of the vehicle travelling, the less speed of the material and height of the material coming off the wheels. It's often the case that on 50-mile-an-hour roads you get windscreens broken, but you don't get that on the slower roads because the debris isn't travelling as fast or as high.
Yeah, we couldn't, so yes, there's a low route management plan in place. We couldn't condition or insist that vehicles go at a lower speed, because ultimately the national speed limit or any legal speed limit would sit above that. It's not a legal mechanism that we could override. My understanding is where these incidents have taken place is within a 30-mile-an-hour limit. It's within Tuddenham Village. So if you come out to site turn right, you go towards Tuddenham Village, it's a 60 until you get to the edge of the village, it's then a 30. The same with Cavenham, I believe. So you're already, where those incidents have taken place, it already is a 30 miles an hour.
I'll just come back, but we can't prove or disprove whether that vehicle was doing under or over 30 miles an hour when those incidents occurred. So
if we had, so the operator has real-time GPS and speed monitoring in their lorries. If it was reported to us, if there's dash cam footage or something, if there was a record of when it took place, an exact time, an exact location, I think that would be pretty easy to nail down based on data. So if those details are passed to us, we can look at it, but again, it is a matter for the police to enforce. It's a speed limit, or it's damage to vehicles.
Understood. And for my final question, I promise you, you mentioned about that the real-time speed and data from the traffic from the quarry. I take it the planning officers have access to that, do they?
We have mechanisms to request that data, yes.
Okay.
We don't have real-time access to it.
No, I
but
understand
we can
that.
request all the data, yeah.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions. I'm still hung up ever so slightly on this link road. Are you saying that whilst it might be deemed suitable by highways, have highways considered obviously the cumulative impact that is happening with this site? These villages are subject to an ever-growing development, and when it first started, it continues to get bigger. So, is it not possible to say that that link road needs to be established, past that Anglian water site that you're talking about? Why can that be requested, and could that be supported as a condition that that link route should actually be implemented?
The simple answer is no, but I'll quantify it in terms of cumulative impacts that has been assessed. So the transport assessment takes into account all the different operations on site, splitting it down to the sand and gravel, the recycling, the asphalt plant that takes place on sites. And then it also takes into account obviously other road users in terms of traffic counts that have been done. If we were in a position where we weren't happy with that data and we decided, okay, there isn't safe and suitable access, or it represents an increase which isn't satisfactory, well then the ball would be placed back in the applicant's court to say, okay, come up with something that is satisfactory, or withdraw your application. At that point, they could look at something like a link road. However, we're not in that position. It's not something we can require. It's not something we can request.
Okay, thank you for that. So, just following up, have we got adequate monitoring actually going on? That these villages aren't being subjected to excessive amounts. Some of the numbers being suggested by the residents seem to be out of kilter with what is being reported. So, can there be a tightening up? Is there a maximum number of vehicle movements that could be stipulated, or at certain times of day where it seems to be more problematic, perhaps for the village? Have we got sufficient monitoring actually going on to make sure that the operator is compliant?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is open to the committee to impose a specific condition if they wished in terms of a maximum amount of HGVs. The batching plant is constrained to its operational capacity. It's not like it can suddenly do an extra 50,000 metres cubed because it can only store so much at a certain point. So based on the movements that's been presented, we could put an explicit condition on if you wish. Okay. And in terms of monitoring, yes, it's a site that we monitor quite regularly. Yes, we've had some complaints recently. I've had our monitoring enforcement officer out 3 or 4 times within the last 2 weeks. At this moment in time, we're not finding any breaches. We're not finding that the road is in an unsuitable condition that can be tracked back to the operator. However, they're not material considerations in the determination of this planning application. That's a separate matter. But the enforceability of the conditions is something that, for this application, you can consider.
Okay, so I'm afraid I've got a couple of follow-ups, if you don't mind. So I think for us to be blind to the, or for us not to listen to the concerns of residents, I think we need to be looking at some form of condition on vehicle movements. Can I just move on to landscaping? Now, the planting season is, is ideally from November to March, probably. So if this application gets approved today, then in theory works can be started. And, is there a need for, because there's concern about sound, is there a need for a bund to be built? And also the planting, it needs to be established, and, quite often immature plants are put in and doesn't provide sufficient screening. Sites like this get developed quite quickly, but the planting is often as an afterthought. And I felt the wording here kind of would lead to a situation where actually the planting would only begin once commencement of the works on the site, you know, in terms of acquiring or whatever is being done. Is there any chance that we can bring that forward? Because, you know, in terms of the bund for sound restrictions to the residents, but also the planting to allow it to mature, or to stipulate more mature plants being put in as part of that landscaping plan. And I've also got a further question about the lighting. Can you confirm that it's low spill lighting, that it's directional lighting that will be put in? Because again, residents raise concerns about that. And I think my final point is there a review mechanism for all of these things, whether it's dust or whether it's sound and vehicle movements? A review mechanism where we keep coming back, because this site is a substantial site and it's getting ever bigger and it's having a bigger impact upon the community, where can that community be protected, where we've got a review mechanism where it keeps going back to say, is this cumulative impact now beginning to become noticeable and is an issue and will have to be addressed? Thank you.
I'll start with the lighting. So the site is located within a special protection area for stone curlews. So this, so lighting and noise is a specific issue which is really sensitive and needs to be considered. The lighting is specifically designed for the location in terms of backspill being directionally pointed down, but still also meeting the health and safety requirements in terms of lighting at certain times of the day when it's needed. That's been reviewed by people like Natural England, as well as our landscape team and ecology team, and they're content with that lighting. In terms of landscaping, we're in a situation where, as it's a retrospective application, part of the development's already been undertaken. Whereas if it wasn't a retrospective application, then the planting and the details of that planting would come forward a lot sooner. Ideally, before construction has commenced. In this case, it's retrospective. You can't consider the fact it's retrospective in terms of cons against the application, if that makes sense. You can't be swayed by the fact that it's retrospective. It being retrospective is not a material planning consideration. But in terms of the planting is there for screening, mainly for stone curlew. And again, it's something that's been reviewed by Natural England, and in the context of the wider site and the other infrastructure on site, this doesn't represent kind of a major change in terms of use of the sites. But if there's a specific point in terms of that landscaping condition you want to tightening up, you know, again, it's within your gift. You could request a change to that. And again, on the review mechanism, there is some review mechanisms in terms of things like dust. If the dust controls aren't adequate and it's creating a really dusty environment, there are mechanisms which we can request additional mitigation. In terms of HGV movements, once it's set. And if there's, for example, a housing development that comes forward nearby, where they'd have to consider the levels of traffic movements already on the network, i.e. if this were to get permission, they'd have to consider that. It's a first past the post system in terms of if you've got permission, everyone else has to consider you and what levels of movements, and then they'd have to mitigate that themselves.
So can I just come back on one point? You said that traffic levels are set. I might have missed it. Is there a total number of vehicle movements stated in the report that they will not go beyond?
In terms of the whole site or just this application?
The whole site.
the whole site, so each permission will have a cap on it. So inadvertently, there is a wider cap. Because if you have 5 applications and you say, okay, you can only have 10 movements each, well then there's a 50 cap, isn't there? There isn't one permission that sets out a cap for absolutely everything, because that wouldn't be possible, because you have to look at it in the context of each individual application. So for this, if you wanted to include a condition that says there'll be no more than 20 movements, or 20 movements, then that's something, yes, you could do.
And my final question is it possible to do time limitations on when those movements take place? Not so much going into the site, but out of the site?
They could. Yes, you could condition that. I wouldn't support that, because often there's a need for concrete, probably when you're looking at peak hours, because it needs to be on site early in the morning, and that is often when people are travelling to work, people are going to school. In terms of controlling it for hours, that's not something that I'd be able to support outside of the conditions we've already got, which is the operational hours.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. First question, I think, is for Officer Lockington, and then, depending on that, I'll ask Officer Rutter a question. So, Officer Lockington, in terms of our job today, are we here to look specifically at this batching plant only, or are we to look at are we able to look at the total of the operation?
I mean, yes, as the planning officer has set out, we're here today to look at this specific application, not at the whole site. So any conditions or any material factors need to be in respect of this particular application, not the site as a whole.
Okay, thank you. So that leads me to my second question. If this whole operation was starting in a year's time, so completely virgin land at the moment, it would be subject, I guess, to a completely different set of conditions to where we are now. We would be looking at the whole operation and potentially imposing things like S106s on the site and extracting fees for developing this road network and so forth. What are the what is this? We see, as we've gone through the gate, we've got no opportunity to come back, it seems to me. And it's a little bit like the frog boiling in a pan. Every extra little bit of development is just creating more and more stress on the local environment, and yet we've got no way of going back to the beginning and saying, hold up, you know, if we'd known this at the beginning, we would not allow this. What's the law on that? Officer Lockington.
Yes, unfortunately, we can't go back and sort of relitigate any past permissions that already exist. We can only look at what we've got now, and of course, if the site was coming forward as a whole new site now, then of course it would be looked at differently, but we're not in that position.
Okay, thank you. So, Officer Rutter, points 148, 149 talk about there is no need for any maximum limits. Now, as I went through your report, that really struck me straight away. As councillor for the Tower Division, I'm dealing daily, more or less, with two major issues, with David Lloyd development and parking spilling over onto Sandlands Drive. Because no limits were set at the beginning of that development, nothing was looked at the operation to say 5,500 members only needs a car park of 225, which even my nine-year-old granddaughter would probably question. We've now got no way of going back. So we've got this almost intractable problem there. I've similarly got an issue on Mildenhall Road with curve motion, where there's a very active
Councillor Robinson,
centre.
if you've got a question, please, because we're not in debate, so I need your question.
I'll get to my point very quickly. Again, curve motion, we've got no way going back. They've got about, I don't know, 10 parking spaces for a very busy premises. So again, people are parking down on Mitchell Avenue. My point here is that
But
we've
it's
got
not
this-
a point. I need a question to the officers.
Yeah,
We're not in
wait,
debate.
question,
Councillor
okay, so
Robinson.
question. What is the point of what is the point of monitoring or any observations if we've got no upper limit, if we've got no ability to put a sanction?
So there is an upper limit.
You're suggesting there's no need for an upper limit?
Yeah, so there is an upper limit in terms of this application. It's secured through condition. Right, let me scroll. Condition 2, compliance with approved details. So if so, the transport statement is secured there. So 2E. So that does secure an upper limit. However, as suggested earlier, if you wanted an explicit condition that says thou shalt not go over X amount of movements, then that is open to you to impose. And you know, if that's what you wanted to do, I would support that.
Thank you very much, Officer Rutter. So how do we, first of all, reconcile this huge difference in numbers between traffic movements? Because clearly, when I read the report, it seemed that a lot was taken on faith that what had been reported was accurate. And then we've had members of the public come to us straight away and say, you know what, our experience is entirely different, not in a minor point, but in a major point different. So what do we do about remedying that?
Yeah, looking at the figures, and again, it's a very high-level look at the transport statement and then the figures which are read out when they were being given, so it's hard to scrutinise them fully. But I don't think they are that different, personally, to what's been presented.
You don't think they're what?
I don't think there is a huge disparity between the figures that have been presented by the parish and those that have been recorded by the traffic counters. And our county highways officers have reviewed the application in terms of several different factors, one of them being movements on the network, and they're content that the movement levels are safe. And that's obviously something they take as seriously as you can, because national policy is it's got to be safe and suitable access to all. So that's not just car users, that's pedestrians, that's horse riders. In that case, the Highways Authority are happy with what's been proposed. So that scrutiny has happened, that has taken place. They do dive into the details and the figures, and they're content with those.
Councillor Sowa.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just for clarification, Councillor Rutter, not Councillor, sorry, Officer Rutter, sorry, I'm sorry. With taking all the arguments we've heard today by all the parties involved, you can still confirm, like on page 10.10, that everything is to be in accordance with local and national planning policy, right?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I address my questions to the planning officer. You have estimated there will be 20 extra movements per day from the site. Is that correct, please?
The applicant has estimated, yes. Not myself. The applicant has put forward. But yes, the 20 extra movements is correct.
Right. Well, the question is this, that every person who's spoken here today has said about the state of the roads or the highway. Much of what is the damage is caused, it's alleged, by vehicles from this site. My question is, do you actually bother to go and look at the access roads to these sites before we come forward with a planning application to see whether there is damage and whether we could impose a levy upon these people to spend some money on the roads to bring them up to a proper condition? I mean, I'm assuming a lot, and I'm taking what the residents have said, but do we actually do an inspection of the access roads, please?
The levy which is paid is by way of tax, by companies, by every resident in Suffolk. The roads are used by everyone, not just this operator. We do not inspect the roads before planning application is determined, because the road is used by everyone. If there's a specific example, if it was at the end of the access road, for example, where the access road meets the public highway, and you can visibly see that verges have been churned up, or the vehicles are overrunning onto the other side of the road, by way of tyre marks, by way of potholes, the road may have collapsed underneath. Well, in those cases, yes, that would be looked at, and it would be easy to pin it down to the operator. That's not the case in this scenario.
Okay, well, I'll take your word for it. Thank you.
Members, do you have any further points of clarification? Councillor Goldsmith.
We can put a condition on for maximum 20 vehicles from the batching plant, but we can't put a condition that there will be less aggregate leaving the site.
Correct, but they kind of come together, don't they? In terms of if there is an overall cap of an extra 20, well then the aggregates wouldn't be able to leave the site because they'd have to stay in a cap, or they'd have to balance it out however they decide to balance it out.
Members, do you have any further points of clarification? No, I'll open the debate. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've read the report, I've listened to what's been said, I've just referred to some notes I've scribbled along as we go along. I mean, quite frankly, I'm quite concerned the amount of time and discussion that has been devoted to things that are not material planning considerations or not relevant to this particular planning application. On any planning application, we're confined to discussion of what is on the table and in that planning application. Let me try and deal with a number of those issues. Mr. Rutter has picked up on them, but I will pick up them in terms of debate. I mean, wear and tear to the road is caused by all road users. That's why we then resurface and repair roads. You can't then start attributing damage to particular users and say that pothole or that wear and tear was caused by that user and fine them or levy them. Secondly, the alleged car damage allegedly caused by users of this quarry is a civil matter. It's not a planning matter or a planning issue. We've talked a great deal about the existing traffic movements from the quarry. They are not relevant to us here. The existing quarry activity has got an extant planning permission that's in place. We've been told what we're here to discuss today is a specific planning application for the weighbridge and the concrete batching plant, not the existing activity. In terms of highway, I would remind members that to consider refusing any planning application on highways grounds, we are under the auspices of NPPF paragraph 116. We've had it confirmed time and time again at this committee that the impact on the highway has to be severe. It has to be virtually catastrophic and to cause gridlock to be able to decline any planning application on highway grounds. We've spoken about the figure of 20 net movements. I understood from paragraph 146 the figure is 26 net increase of HGV movements. That is not a catastrophic or severe impact on the highway. 26 extra vehicle movements on a highway that will be taking several thousand vehicle movements a day. We've had a great deal of discussion about 20-mile-an-hour zones and potential consideration of link roads. They would be considered by county highways under a far wider remit. They're not relevant to the discussion of this particular planning application. We've talked about monitoring compliance. Those are planning enforcement issues. They are not planning considerations. Whether an applicant complies with the conditions of an application were it to be granted, they are planning enforcement issues. They are not planning considerations. Again, a lot of the discussion on potential conditions we would impose. There is the principle of the Wednesday unreasonableness, where you cannot impose conditions that are unreasonable. I mean, as to having a liaison committee, I'm not against the idea, and I'm sure I could argue it would be quite beneficial. But is it reasonable to impose that as a condition? I've never in my entire time on planning committees heard of us imposing that somebody who operates a retail park, an amusement arcade, a nuclear power station, forcing them as a condition of planning to have a liaison committee as a condition of their use, and different speed limits, as was told. Every road user complies with the road condition. You can't start imposing different speed limits on different users of a highway. Coming on to the substance of the application and the report from the officer, I mean, I'm mindful of the fact that to support life as we know it, we need quarrying activity. We all live in houses, we all go to hospitals, schools, and indeed this building that needs aggregate and cement and concrete to build it. But more specifically, under our planning policies, we're obligated to maintain a sufficient supply of aggregates and other planning and other building materials. So therefore, this report recognises that this application will contribute towards that under policies MP2, MP8. In terms of all of the objections on noise, air quality, dust, impact on the highway, I'm minded to follow what the experts say. We are told in the report there have been no objections to this planning application from SEC air quality, SEC ecology, SEC flood management, SEC highways, SEC landscape, SEC public rights of way, the Environment Agency, Natural England. They are all experts in their field and have said no aspect of this planning application gives them cause for concern or objection. I've covered the highway issue. We're not going to support any objection or conditions due to 26 additional highway movements. The application is compliant with the guidance on noise and dust. I see no valid material planning considerations for refusal. I mean, I'm open to reasonable conditions. I think the officers confirmed the hours of use are already conditioned. I won't object to a condition asking the applicant to set up a liaison committee. I think it's actually an unreasonable thing to do as a condition, but I'm sure the applicant would be willing. I mean, I'm less amenable to a condition of setting a maximum use. Again, do we set maximums on how many people can visit and use a leisure centre, a business park, an amusement arcade, a seafront? They're facilities. To start rationing how many people can use it, but I'll be guided by the officer if to support the application we set a maximum number of vehicle movements and a liaison committee. But as for speed limits and different speed limits to everybody else who uses the King's Highway would be totally unreasonable. But I'm supportive of the application and prepared to propose the officer's recommendation that we approve, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Bird, can I just check that that was a proposal for the application as it is?
It was indeed, yes. But obviously, I would now be the holder of that proposal if people, other members do suggest conditions. I've already said, personally, I wouldn't impose any. I'm open to the one on a liaison committee. I'm open to the one on the maximum number of vehicle movements. I certainly wouldn't on imposing speed limits or different speed limits to everybody else who's allowed to use the King's Highway.
Councillor Stanbury, I had your hand, but I need a seconder for Councillor Bird's proposal.
Well, I'm happy to do that, actually, because I have listened very keenly to my esteemed colleague, Councillor Bird, and who's covered many of the points that I was going to raise. And I think the only area where we slightly differ, although I think he was warming to it in the end, was the imposition of the liaison committee. And the reason why I would encourage him to support that as part of his proposal, is that I attend the Worlington Quarry liaison meeting once a year, and I find it very useful, and that is a great opportunity for local residents and particularly representatives of the parish council to attend and to raise formally with the agents or the client main concerns locally that they've experienced. So if Councillor Bird is happy to see that as a condition, and I do believe he was warming to that in the end, then I'll be very happy to second his proposal.
Yeah, I have already indicated I'm willing to have added a condition that a liaison forum is established. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Mason?
Thank you, Chair. If we're minded to approve the application, I think I consider myself a strong local community councillor, and I wouldn't wish this committee to sound tone deaf towards the concerns raised by the parish council or the residents. This is a growing site, and in a couple of years' time, will there be an additional proposal put forward, but an additional one? So I think the concerns raised by the parish council shouldn't necessarily, or residents should be dismissed just necessarily on planning law and planning rules. The whole purpose of a debate is for us to recognise the impact that is faced on these communities. And whilst I recognise that we have restrictions on what we can do and what we can condition, I think the debate is worthy if it is only to recognise that we sympathise with the impact that this quarry perhaps is having on the surrounding roads and the impact that it's having with villagers. So I absolutely defend that right to raise any comments, even if they are beyond the scope of what we can actually decide upon as a
Point of order, Madam Chairman. I think I do need to just point out for the whole of the committee and for Councillor Mason, speculation on what an application could lead to and what could come forward on a site in the future is not a valid consideration for a planning committee. I hope Mr. Rutter would confirm that. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I hadn't quite finished. I don't disagree with what Councillor Bird is saying, but equally we must be mindful not to appear tone deaf to the concern of residents, and that is my point. Thank you.
Councillor Sowa? Okay. Members, is there anybody else that would like to enter the debate? Councillor Stringer?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just want to make a couple of points. I have a quarry in my division that does cause several concerns, and it's had not a dissimilar history where it started off as gravel extraction, and then all of a sudden equipment turns up that starts batching concrete, and hang on, we need to get a second application in because that now needs a further planning permission. So I have some experience of what happens when concrete batching plants do arrive on quarries. They seem a very good idea to put the two together because you're taking gravel out of the ground. All you've got to do is import some of the smaller elements of it, the cement, and then off you go. The only problem is, of course, you then do really rev up the potential of traffic in that area. And it's not just bigger lorries. We've got to be really careful about the number of lorries as opposed to the weight and type. You could easily cut the number of lorries by having a batching plant, but suddenly those lorries have just got a lot bigger that will move this stuff around. And they have variable amounts of impact that you would never have envisaged in the original granting of the permission. And don't forget, it's not just a one-way street. Any planning permission, everything that you put within it should be enforceable and reasonable. So to suggest you have to ignore everything that went before is not quite right, because everything that you should be agreeing should be reasonable and enforceable, so it should be based in reality and not just a quirk of policy or a quirk of numbers. Equally, the thing about, we can't possibly have differing speeds. I live in rural Suffolk. I fully recognise that a tractor will never attain 60 miles an hour. We already have different vehicles that have different speeds in our areas, purely because of the limits of the vehicle. So I see no reason why for the reasons of residential and amenity, and actually for the well-being of people, and the ability to promote cycling and walking. Suddenly we have a quarry, we forget we also have that duty. That duty has evaporated, has it? I don't think it has. I think those two duties sit beside each other. We have a duty to process planning applications to make sure they're reasonable and sustainable and enforceable. So I think the pursuit of making sure those vehicles are reacting when they're in this residential community in a reasonable manner was not a bad thing to pursue. So at the moment, I hear that there's people backing up to support this application. Oh, there's one other point I just want to make about Councillor Bird made the thing about, well, you can't approve a particular venue and then limit the numbers. Yes, we normally do that by licence. We normally do that. We normally say this is a venue here for speedway riding, but it has a cap of X number of people because of the local traffic network. We do that all the time. So it's not just a pass go and you can do what you like. I say at the moment I cannot support this application in its present form because I do believe that the rights and the duties of the residents affected have not been adequately addressed within the conditions. But I do hope there will be a liaison committee. It is a fig leaf, but it's a way of having a two-way conversation to iron out some of the, quote, worst excesses that could possibly, and I hope won't, happen.
Members, it is within the gift that if we wanted, we could write a note on the speed to remind people of the speed of the road, but we couldn't make it a condition. Again, that would be for the proposer and the seconder if they wish to accept a note of some sort.
Yeah, but can I pick up on that, Madam Chair? That would be a totally unreasonable condition. Any user of the road has to comply with the speed limit set down on that road, or otherwise they're subject to enforcement by the police. It's not a matter for a planning committee to say, oh, when you drive your car down the road, make sure you only go 60 miles an hour or 30 or whatever the speed limit is on the road. It's going into the realms of fantasy to say that's enforcing speed limits on the King's Highway is now a function of the planning committee. It's simply not. I mean, I think we need to pick up on the issue of just looking at, there's 19 conditions. We do need to agree some wording of an additional condition number 20. I don't know if I could propose some now to see if committee are happy with it. Shall I say, the applicant shall liaise with the local parish councils and other...
Sorry, Councillor Bird, I do have some standard wording which
if you've got some,
community liaison conditions.
I was trying to help you out, but if you've got some, then perhaps you can read it just so that we can agree it. Yeah.
So, Councillor Bird, you don't accept about the speed as a note?
It's not the function of a planning committee to enforce speed limits on the King's Highway. You know, please, applicant, when you build your house, make sure you drive at 30 miles an hour on the road outside your house, because that's what the speed limit is. We're going into the realms of fantasy now to start saying that it's the job of a planning committee to enforce speed limits.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much. Very interested to hear Councillor Mason and Councillor Stringer speak. I think they're considerably more eloquent than I am. But let me try and make my point. The reason I was asking the questions earlier on was because it seems to me in my 9 months of experience as a councillor that the planning system doesn't capture problems either when we've got a virgin site, as I mentioned David Lloyd, or in this case where you've got something that's gradually developing. And the sense that we've got to just sign off on process, it just doesn't sit well with me at all. I will really struggle to put my hand up to this application today because I'm very concerned about the residents. I would not want to be living in Cavenham or Tuddenham with lorries hammering past from presumably about 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't know when Cavenham and Tuddenham became villages, but it was well before 1960s when this site first started being used for extraction. And so I don't know how we handle this, but from my point of view, 95,000 tonnes of aggregate and sand will be extracted annually from this site. I think Councillor Sawyer's point was relevant which is what it's going to be used for. My presumption is going to be used for housing. I don't know how many tonnes goes into a house, but it could be 1, 2, 3,000 houses get built. So we have a beneficial, Suffolk County has a beneficial interest from this quarry and from the aggregates that are being extracted. And I think it would be wrong of us to look the other way. There is an opportunity to put in this bypass, which would completely alleviate the problems of traffic for Cavenham and Tuddenham. And somehow or other, I think we would need a commitment that we would find the money somehow to have that put in. Under normal circumstances, if this was a virgin site, we would be saying to the developer, right, S106, N millions for a road. We've missed that opportunity, we don't have that opportunity, so I think we've got to come up with some commitment, something, I'm not sure how you do it legally, but that says we will energetically look at putting in a by-road. As I understand it, this development goes on till 2053, so for another 28 years, the dear residents of Cavenham and Tuddenham have got to put up with an increasing number of lorries hammering past their front windows from perhaps 6 in the morning. I think that's unacceptable. We've got to find a solution for them. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry to interject again, Madam Chairman, but as the proposer of the recommendation, I feel obliged to do so. I made the point earlier.
Councillor Bird, do you have a point of order?
Yeah, the point of order is that it would not be appropriate to add in a condition about building a link road. If that would be a matter for the highway department within this council to look at the whole wider issue of road use in that area and consider whether a bypass, link road, whatever is required. You can't impose that as a condition because of one particular user of the road.
I'm going to bring Andy back in.
Yeah, thank you. There's no legal or lawful route to capture what you've suggested, Councillor, unfortunately. We can't consider, okay, well, what if the site came forward as a whole now? We can't consider what the applicant may propose. We can't consider what our response to that might be. We can only consider that which is set out in a national planning policy framework that sets out the site must achieve safe and suitable access for all. That's not just road users, that's not just vehicles, that's walkers, wheelers, horse riders, and our county highways colleagues have reviewed it and are content that those national policy objectives are met. And I can just pick up on the community liaison condition as well. And it would be something along the lines of within 3 months of the date of this permission, a constitution of a community liaison group shall be submitted to the Mineral Planning Authority. The constitution shall be implemented as approved in writing by the Mineral Planning Authority prior to any operations associated with the concrete batching plant. The constitution shall make provision for those who would be invited, the selection of a chairperson, drafting and circulation of agendas, recording and circulation of minutes, approximate dates of at least 2 regular meetings per year, the circumstances under which an extraordinary meeting may be called, the local venue to be used, and the proposed first date of the community liaison group. Meetings of the community liaison group should be held in accordance with the approved constitution.
Madam Chairman, I'm content with that wording. If we add that in as condition 20, I would so propose and accept that as an amendment to my original recommendation for approval.
Councillor Stanbury?
Yes, I accept that, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mason?
Thank you, Chair. This is called the debate, and so, you know, it's a good opportunity to explore all ideas. I'm not quite sure I fully heard or understood what was mentioned there. I was going to suggest that there was a condition of the wording saying of no more than 20 vehicle movements per day, and whether that can specifically be said and stated in as a condition. That's number one. And number two, which is slightly more tenuous, I can remember from previous planning meetings, the discussions about being a good neighbour. I'm thinking about the Widdington's recycling example. And I think I have seen other instances where there have been construction site speed limits external to the site, where it is recommended, not enforceable, but it's about being a good neighbour. Is it possible for it to be conditioned that through Cavenham and Tuddenham, that those good neighbour reminders not to go above 20 miles an hour for construction vehicles? It may not be enforceable, but it's about being a good neighbour and trying to remind drivers that actually you drive with caution, drive with care through these villages, as opposed to it just being, you know, is there any scope for discussion with a condition around that?
So on the first point, in terms of movements, yes, that would be within your gift to propose, and then up to the proposer and seconder whether to accept. On the second point, unfortunately not. You touched on, regardless of whether it's enforceable, there are 6 legal tests that every planning condition must meet, and one of those is enforceability. I mentioned earlier we could include a note on the planning permission. So planning permissions do include notes afterwards. It's usually things on reminding operators of it's an offence to develop a right-of-way, or there's things on biodiversity net gain, there's things on planning appeals, but again, it would be subject to proposer and seconder to agreeing that a note be included reminding them of the speed limits. That's all we can do on that, I'm afraid.
Okay, so Chair, can I propose that the wording does say, subject to somebody seconding, that vehicle movements won't increase by excess of 20 vehicle movements per day, and also that a note be added that that drivers travelling through Cavenham and Tuddenham should be mindful of the impact that they are having as they're passing through those villages.
Madam Chairman, as
Councillor Bird, I need a seconder for Councillor Mason. Then I need to know, as the proposer, if you accept it, followed by Councillor Stanbury. So is there a seconder for Councillor Mason's proposal? Councillor Beer? Councillor Bird, are you happy to accept?
I'm most reluctant, Madam Chairman. I mean, we keep mentioning 20. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Paragraph 146 says the figures have estimated a net increase of 26 HGV movements per day, but that would be an average. These people are running a business. They can't predict how many customers will need how much concrete on every single day. One day they could send out less than that number of vehicle movements to deliver some cement. Another day it could be slightly more. We're not talking baked beans that you could deliver and they can sit on the shop shelf for days on end before being purchased. Cement has to be used on the day. If a builder needs a delivery of cement for the brickies to lay the bricks, they need them on that day. They can't ring the customer up, sorry, we're up to our maximum number of vehicle movements we can have today. I would only be prepared to accept that amendment if we can have an assurance from the spokesman on behalf of the applicant that that wouldn't impede the practicable and efficient running of this person's business.
Before we get into a process conversation, I can just clarify that the number is 20, so my report isn't correct on paragraph 146. It should be 20. I've double checked that, so my apologies. And it would be usual for us to include wording on, it could be an average over a 1 week working period, so that would normally be Monday to Saturday mornings, or you could do an average over a month. So that's some standard wording which does fit within that flexibility.
Madam Chairman, I'm most reluctant. I mean, I don't want to quote a whole load of planning policy, but you read the NPPF, I think it's paragraphs 85 through to about 95, that say that the planning process should support business and business growth. Are we in the business now of starting to impose maximum limits on how much business a business should be allowed to conduct a day? And as I said with this isn't a business where you can deliver goods ahead of the need of time. They have to be delivered at the point of use. Cement needs to be delivered at the time that a construction project needs it. It can't be sent in a batch a month earlier. To start imposing limits on how much business a business is allowed to conduct is contrary to planning policy.
If I could just interject that we do of course sometimes impose conditions to limit movements, and in this occasion I think it would be lawful to impose a condition as long as perhaps it incorporates such flexibility as the planning officer has referred to.
So, as Councillor Bird hasn't accepted the amendment, we do have an amendment on the table from Councillor Mason, seconded by Councillor Beer, and we now enter debate on the amendment from Councillor Mason. Councillor Stringer?
Very quickly. Yeah, the amendment has some merit, but the problem that you have, because of how the planning system is stacked up, is that issue of enforceability. I hear the frustration coming from Councillor Bird. I equally see that if you were spreading out this number over a period of time, how is that reasonable? Has a member of that community got to sit there all of the operating hours and note down who's actually going to check that whether this has been triggered or not, unless we can pull it off the data, which we can, I believe. Having said that, the concrete industry doesn't quite work like that. You may get a job for a very heavy pour where you've got quite a lot of subcontractors coming in as well, and you'll be having an awful lot of lorry movements in very short succession if you've got a large pour. It may have lots of individual conservatories with, there's a smaller stuff. We don't know, but it would be unreasonable to condition that, as Councillor Bird will pop up and tell you. Which is why the spreading it out over time, if you're about to cross the road and you can't cross the road because there's a whole team of lorries, you don't say to yourself, oh, well, never mind, it's going to average out over the month. You want to cross the road then. You want to have a safe road to cycle on or walk on with your children and dogs then. You don't want it in a fictional month, which is why I believe where we've got to in terms of here, it hasn't addressed those, but I don't believe we can reasonably address them within the conditions. I think what Councillor Mason has explored is the outer limits of what the planning system can deal with, and frankly I feel that we're in the edges of unsustainability, and that I think is the difference between those that are supporting this recommendation and not.
Councillor Sowa?
Thank you very much, Chair. I wish this discussion would be less emotional. We know that the recommendations are based in accordance with local and national planning policy. Here is a local business which produces cement which can be used in different ways, for example, for construction of houses. I did not know that Councillor Mason is against housing development. We need houses, we need constructions. This local
Chair,
business
point of order,
needs
please.
to be,
Councillor Sowa, he has a point of order.
At no point did I say that I'm anti-business, quite the contrary. But I am interested in trying to find the best way forward for everybody. I absolutely support business, and please, I'd ask Councillor Sowa to retract that statement. Thank you.
Okay, but by limiting the vehicles to 20, you will definitely have less houses built in that time where we would need more concrete, because as Councillor Stringer pointed out, there are occasions where we need many more lorries on the road using transporting concrete. Therefore, I would really like to see that we go with the recommendations which were put out by the officers in the first place, with no ifs and with no restrictions. The other thing I wanted to point out that a liaison...
Councillor Sowa, I need to ask you if that is a proposal to go for
yes,
the officers'
it is a proposal.
original recommendations, which was the one without the liaison group.
No, without, yes. I propose to go with the recommendations by the officers on page 10 under point 9. Because the liaison committee or group will not be visited very well. As we heard, the parishes didn't really contacted Suffolk County Council or their councillor, their local councillor.
We can pick that up after, but we still need to, we're debating currently what Councillor Mason has on the table at the minute, and then we have another one that we can come in after.
I definitely can't go with any restrictions by vehicles was what Councillor Mason suggested. Thank you.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. The whole purpose of the debate and to put forward conditions is to try and fully explore what might be possible, that is reasonable. I hear what Councillor Stringer has said, that it might be unfair. I just worry that 20 could become 30, could become 40, could be, you know, and that this village will be adversely affected. I'm happy to proceed and not change my condition, but if a committee can actually decide whether they wish to support it or not, I'm happy to proceed on that basis. Thank you.
Councillor Beer.
Well, I seconded your proposal, so I should still do that. But could I, just for clarification, we've got one proposal, we've got one recommendation for conditions, and then we've had another proposal from...
No, Councillor Beer, what we currently have on the table is, we originally had the proposal from Councillor Bird, and now we're currently debating Councillor Mason's amendment. We then have to vote on Councillor's amendment, and then we either go back originally to Councillor Beers, or if Councillor Sowa wants to come in with another amendment, we would then have to second that and debate that again.
Well, I think she did put forward something,
yeah,
so
but
can we clear that?
We have to wait for Councillor Sowa to put that after we voted on this amendment. We have to clear this amendment first. So if there's nobody else that wants to talk on this amendment, Councillor Bird?
Yeah, I did want to speak to the amendment. I referred earlier to the NPPF supporting economic growth and economic development. It's even more fundamental than that. The primary policy that underpins all planning applications in the planning process is NPPF 11, paragraph 11, which says that the planning process should support the it has a presumption in favour of sustainable development. And I would argue this is sustainable development. It's growth. You can't object to a planning application because it results in something new, something extra, a change. The amendment is suggesting limiting the number of vehicle movements, and to sustain that and to object to override the condition of paragraph 11 telling you that you should presume in favour of sustainable development. The only grounds on which you could support this amendment and oppose that would be NPPF paragraph 116, which talks about impact on the highway. I've already made out you are not going to sustain any amendment, condition or refusal on 20 or even far more than 20 additional HG movements on a road that's probably already taking thousands of vehicles a day. NPPF 116 clearly states, and we've had it confirmed in this committee on numerous occasions, that the impact has to be severe or catastrophic. 20, 30, 40 extra HGVs on a road already taking thousands of vehicles would not comply, would not give you grounds for an amendment or a condition or a refusal under 116.
Members, is there anybody that would like to debate on Councillor Mason's amendment? Councillor Goldsmith?
With my experience in the construction business, the actual vehicle movements would be self-regulated by the amount the batcher can produce every day. So you won't have empty lorries leaving there. The batcher can't cope with it. So it will be limited by the amount of concrete that can be batched.
Councillor Mason, I'm just going to get you, as there's nobody else to talk on, just exactly what your amendment is for members so that we're clear.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm going to proceed, if nothing else, for that sense of decency that I'm trying to get across in terms of the impact that this is having on the community. The amendment is to limit vehicle movements. I would say to 20 over the course of a month. That way it would average it out. Am I not able to do that?
And just to check that includes the community liaison group as well.
I can't hear you, sorry.
You've got and that includes also the community liaison, which is already on the
Oh,
table.
yes.
Yeah.
But that was, the liaison group wasn't my suggestion.
Yeah, it's already on the table, so it would include it.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, members, are you happy? And Councillor B, you're happy as the seconder still? All those in favour? That's the vote to accept Councillor Mason's amendment. That's 4 against. That's 6 against, 7 against. So your amendment has not been carried. So we now go back to Councillor Bird's proposal, seconded by Councillor Stanbury, which is the original motion.
I just confirm, Madam Chairman, obviously I had already accepted an amendment to add a 20th condition with the wording as proposed by Mr Rutter for the liaison committee or whatever form it's going to be so named.
So we have officer's recommendation with the added wording from Andy about the liaison group. So members, we're back to the original, which is from Councillor Bird, that we've already heard, which is the officer's recommendation, and establishment of a liaison group as worded by Andy. But we can also now still, while we're in debate on that one, put forward additional proposals if any members have additional proposals to put forward. Would anybody like to put forward an additional proposal or debate? Councillor Sowa?
Thank you, Chair. I still think the amendment with the liaison group wouldn't be justified because the parishes haven't been really engaging with the officers or with anybody from the Suffolk County Council. And they had this...
we can't amend it to remove the proposal that we have on the table. We can't make it a negative.
Sorry about this. Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kemp?
Yeah, I just place on record, Madam Chairman, although I haven't got the expertise of Councillor Bird on planning, I've been involved for 40 years. I'm sorry the expertise hasn't come to me, but I was brought up that you listen to residents, and that's the real reason why we all sit in this chamber, because we are elected by residents to care for their views, and I think this is a mess, quite frankly. It should have been ironed out before I ever got here, There's a lack of a liaison committee, which amazes me, because I've heard every pit I've sat here on judgment on over the last 20 years has had a liaison committee. I don't understand why this hasn't had one. So I shall vote against it, because I'm sorry, I'm not in favour of A1 and robots taking our places. I'm firmly in favour of elected members deciding, and the whole process represents what residents feel, because at the end of the day, they are the people who attend the polling stations. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bird.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to pick up that point, again, I'm going to speak from memory. I may not be correct. There is Ministry of Housing and Local Government guidance. I believe it was issued in 2013, don't quote me on that, and I believe it's paragraph 16, again, don't quote me on that, I'm going from memory, and that states when a planning committee assesses a planning application, objections from residents or other groups are not in of themselves grounds to turn down or refuse a planning application. They can only be used if those objections from residents refer to material planning considerations. And as I say, I've said that in terms of compliance with material planning considerations, I believe this application to be compliant. But I would remind Councillor Kemp, under planning guidance and planning law, objections from residents or other interested parties are not of themselves grounds to refuse a planning application.
A point of order, I didn't suggest that. I suggested you listen to residents and you try to ameliorate the process by accommodating some of their concerns. That's what I suggested.
Councillor Bridgeman.
Yes, I don't think the residents are getting a fair shout on this. I do understand, regards business, that there should be a liaison committee for this, because that would be taken in these, and they have recourse within that to maybe come back here. Should it be 100 vehicles, that should be dealt with there, but there should be a way that they can come back to us and say, we've got a committee, it's not going right, etc., etc. What the company are doing is wrong. All right seeing it go through, but I want to see some form of committee so that they, so that they can do that. And I'll leave it there. That's what I would like to see, because ultimately I know it's a bit simplistic, but the residents were there first and they need to be heard.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to endorse what Councillor Kemp had said. I think these planning communities they're filmed, they're broadcast on YouTube, and there is scope for reputational damage for Suffolk County Council if due care and consideration isn't taken into account of residents' daily lived experiences. What is planning law and the framework by which we operate? Absolutely, and I absolutely agree with Councillor Bird in everything he said, but should there be scope for exploring what can be done to mitigate? Absolutely, and that is what we should do, and I resent the fact that it seems to be suggested that that discussion shouldn't have taken place. We have to be very careful that we're not guilty of being tone deaf. Thank you.
Councillor Sowa.
Thank you very much, Chair. I could agree to the liaison committee, to the amendment suggested by Councillor Bird, if we say that at least the turnout is above 10. Because if people don't turn up, if parishes do not come, why should there be a liaison committee? So I would say, if we do change the wording of the recommendations, then we should actually say, yeah, okay, liaison committee makes sense if the turnout is at least 10. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Sowa. Just to clarify, the original application did have a community liaison group. It operated for years. However, it was decided between the operator at the time and the community that ultimately there was no point in meeting anymore because there were no issues to discuss. So there was a community liaison group, and to clarify on, well, there should be a certain amount of people attend, that's something that I wouldn't quantify them. There shall be 10 members of the community turn up, but when a constitution is put forward for that liaison group, it will detail and say potentially there must be a member from the parish, there must be, and the operator must be there, and Suffolk County Council must be there. But I wouldn't quantify that there shall be 10 residents, for example. I don't believe that would be acceptable.
Councillor Bird.
Yeah, sorry to prolong this further, Madam Chairman. Yeah, just picking up on what Councillor Rutter said. As the original proposer, why I was prepared to accept the liaison forum is to pick up the points made by Councillor Kemp and Councillor Mason. I wasn't in favour of us imposing restrictions as conditions, but I was in favour, because of public concern, for that very reason, for that group to then say, it may well be that liaison forum committee, whatever it's called, might agree to a maximum, or certainly the applicant might say for the next 3 months we're only going to do this amount of business, so we can guarantee that there'll be a maximum of so many HGVs on the road next month, a month. That's for them to discuss. Again, it'll be ridiculous just now to overcomplicate this and start dictating the terms of this forum and what the quorum. I perhaps could say that I've lost count of how many parish councils I've attended where there's been no members of the public present. I would hate to say that those meetings shouldn't have taken place or were somehow invalid as a result of that. I think we really need to just leave the wording as it is and let the parishes, other stakeholders and the applicant form this liaison group to their best endeavours and leave them to it.
I have nobody further to speak in the debate. So are members happy with what Andy read out earlier for the liaison wording? Do you want to just clarify that quickly?
I'll just remind members of the wording. Within 3 months of date of this permission, a constitution of community liaison group should be submitted to the Mineral Planning Authority. The constitution shall be implemented as approved in writing by the Minerals Planning Authority prior to operation of the concrete batching plant commencing. The constitution shall make provision for those who would be invited, the selection of a chairperson, the drafting and circulation of agendas, the recording and circulation of minutes, the approximate dates of at least 2 regular meetings per year, the circumstances under which extraordinary meetings may be called, the local venue to be used, and a proposed date for the first meeting of the community liaison group.
So members, we have the vote on the officer's recommendation that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions as set out in Appendix A with the additional wording you've just heard from Andy about the establishment of a liaison group. All those in favour? That's 6-4. Against? 5 against. Any abstentions? 1. The item is carried. That concludes today's Development and Regulation Committee meeting. Thank you everyone for your attendance and contributions today. The next meeting of the Development and Regulation Committee is expected to take place at 10 a.m. on the 23rd of June 2026. The next site inspection reserve date for planning matters is scheduled for the morning of Friday the 19th of June. This meeting is now closed. Thank you.